anything.
It's on item number 1.
On item number 1?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Kirk.
Under the motion, item number 3, to be revised as follows. Provide one plan view showing all new features of the proposed bridge design, sidewalks, and adjacent affected areas. Number 5.
Is that what we said?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Number 5, we also talked about studying enhanced treatments for the new sidewalks. So I would just add, after the sentence there, study adding enhanced treatments of the new sidewalks.
Okay.
That's all on that item.
All right. Anybody else on item number 1? Item 2? Item 3?
Oh, item 3, I have some additional comments.
Okay.
So under the motion, item number 1, the second sentence, it was suggested shifting the sculpture further southwest from the highest, further southwest, away from the highest point of grass to the lower point of the grass, thus lowering the apparent height from the sidewalk.
Did you get that, Gloria? All right.
And number 4, I just thought we should simplify that to say no new benches.
If we didn't make a suggestion in the motion at all to suggest shifting, then we can eliminate that. But if we did, then we need to keep it.
Well, unless I'm mistaken, it was the applicant had mentioned that in his presentation that they were considering shifting the direction the benches were turning. It wasn't actually part of the proposal, and in the motion which I made, I believe, yes, what I meant to say was that he could go ahead and propose that shift, but we didn't want him to add any new benches.
How does number 4 read? Doesn't it say it in number 4?
It says in number 4, it was suggested, I think it should say to shift, Gloria, the existing benches to face the sculpture. But that's not what you're saying. You didn't say to suggest shifting them.
What I meant to say was to include one of the other comments that another board member had made about not providing any new benches.
So how do you want item number 4 to read?
No new benches.
Doesn't it say that?
It does. I just want to take the rest of it out and just have it simply say no new
okay.
benches.
I see.
It's fine the way it is. Madam Chair?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, it's fine the way it is because we use the word suggested, which is a soft word, and it actually is a good idea to have the benches facing towards the sculpture and having a seating arrangement. I mean, if that's what we would like, or see what they come back with as what they want to propose.
Yeah, and I understand what Kirk is saying, that his suggestion in his motion was that he doesn't want to see any additional benches, and that's what the motion says, Kirk.
Right.
It does say that already. What your motion intent was, it does state that. So
It does.
It states no additional benches.
Right.
What it states before that is just, it was suggested by somebody, I don't know who, it doesn't say who, that the existing benches be shifted to face the sculpture, and I think that's still a suggestion.
Okay, we can leave it that way. Sure.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I also think number 5 is confusing, but that was something that was inserted by another board member because in the first item of that motion we're saying that some board members thought it should be lowered, and then we're saying that by shifting the location also lowering the height. But then in number 5 we're saying the proposed height is fine, but lower the base, which is not going to affect the overall height, as the presenter mentioned. So I just felt 5 was confusing. And then in 6, we say again, under number C, that...
Before you go into number 6, though, let's talk about number 5. Do you think it should be stated differently? You're the one that made the motion, like you say. So if it's confusing, we should say something about that item number.
Well, I would, I don't know how other board members feel, but I would say that we could preface number 5 by saying some board members felt the proposed size and so on, and leave it the rest of the way it is. Because I was of the opinion, as were some other board members, on item the first item of the motion, that by shifting it, we would also be lowering the apparent height from the sidewalk. So number 5 is, to me, again, confusing. But if board members want to keep that as part of the motion, then I think we should preface it also by saying some board members felt.
Well, again, it gets into what did we say when we made the motion? What was said when we made the motion? If we all voted and the motion was carried 6-0, everybody agreed on the motion. So for us to say some board members felt the proposed size and scale are appropriate would be different than stating that the proposed size and scale are appropriate, which is what it says in the motion. Do you understand the difference?
I do, but there was a lot of discussion during that motion, a lot of suggestions being made and counter-suggestions after the motion had been made. So I think this is, it's part of the confusion. It's representing part of the confusion and different opinions on the board. Because then the reason I mentioned number 6 is because number 6 also says, item C, size, bulk, and scale are appropriate. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's fine. If other board members are fine leaving it kind of with some conflicts in it, in the motion, then we can just leave it.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually was the one who seconded. I'm fine with the way it is because we always have the audio tape and the videotape to refer to. But I believe item 5 was we wanted to sort of say with the reduction of the height of the base, which was going to be a bench, but the overall height of the structure was going to stay the same at 20 feet. So that's what we were implying at the end of number 5. And number 6 says we're satisfied with the size, bulk, and scale of the structure, so of what is being proposed. So I think the minutes are fine the way they are, even though there's a little bit of a grayness.
I think the applicant understood what we were after, that if they
Okay.
could reduce the base so that you could sit on the base, then it would be something that the board would look forward to seeing. But I think the overall intent, especially with number 6, having made this comment of number 6, that we came to the conclusion that the project does not pose inconsistencies, and then we stated size, bulk, and scale are appropriate, that we've already kind of given them that. They walked away with that impression. So for us to take that back at this point doesn't seem appropriate. I mean, maybe we could say, in general, the proposed size and scale as presented seem appropriate. If you wanted to be more vague about it, I didn't make the motion, so obviously Kirk has some concerns. He made the motion. So.
Since it is going on to the Planning Commission, I just wanted to make sure we were clear about it. And I think we did. There were different review points, so I think it's fine that there's different viewpoints in the motion, I suppose.
Okay.
If other board members feel that way.
Is everybody okay with the way the motion is?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair, there is a bit of a conflict, I think, for number 6, the C at the very end, where it says the project is sensitive to the adjacent historic terminal, and that sort of
That
conflicts
should
with
be
what we
D,
said.
actually, Gloria. Say
That's
that
right.
again.
Oh, right. So D.
And so say that again, Chris.
So we're saying that it's sensitive to the historic terminal, but then we're also saying that some members feel that it needs to be further away.
Right.
So there's a little
think the comment about moving it further away was not because it was too
Architectural.
close to the historic terminal, it was to make the apparent size smaller.
It was both.
It was both.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I concur with that. Again, it is a conflict within the motion.
I guess architecturally, we're not saying that it conflicts, so maybe that's where I think we're talking more about location.
Right. Well, that's a good way. We could revise that to say that the sculpture does not conflict with the architecture of the adjacent historic terminal.
Can we really say that? Is that really true? That's not a true statement.
Well, I think was a point made by one of the
could talk all day about that one.
architectural historians that because it was so distinct from in style, that it didn't conflict with it. So that's the sense in which I agree with that viewpoint.
Do you think item D should state that?
Madam Chair?
Yeah. Hi,
I
Henry.
think what you need to communicate to the Planning Commission is, do you desire it to be shifted or not? I thought there was a movement to have it shift away to be
Right.
more sensitive to the resource.
Right.
So if that's what you'd like to say, I think that you need to say that more clearly, not have that conflict.
That's what I was after.
Okay,
And
so
you can
we
say
do
that
in item D.
In item D, you could say that, if appropriately shifted, or however you want to word that.
Well, in that case, so I would suggest we reword item C as well. Size, bulk, and scale are appropriate with slight adjustments as recommended. And D, the project is sensitive to the adjacent, with the shifts recommended by the board, the project is sensitive to the adjacent historic terminal.
Okay.
If everyone agrees with that shift,
Well,
if you don't, this is the time to.
yeah, see, I think
Judge,
the closer we shifted to the entry, to me, it was not the right direction. I think the way the sculptor had placed it was appropriate for me. Now, I know the board was somewhat divided on the location, and that's why we're sort of having this conversation. So
Maybe we need to vote on it again, or?
No. I don't think we can.
I think they got the gist of our view from the meeting itself.
I think we were divided on that.
We did state on item 6, the very first thing we said was, the project does not pose major inconsistencies with the criteria. And we still feel that way. There's no major inconsistencies, but there are minor.
I think the question would be, if they don't shift it, are you going to have a problem approving it? And that is a likelihood that they don't come back and shift it. So you need to make that clear.
Can we say something like study alternative sites?
Well, we did that in item number 1.
Or different
Some board members, we already
different
said,
placement.
we already excluded Chris because he doesn't believe it needed to be further away. We said some board members prefer relocating. So that covers that. So what Kirk was saying in item 6 about item C, whatever suggestion you made seemed appropriate. Kirk, what did you say again?
To add with slight adjustments as recommended.
And then,
I don't think that's right.
you don't think that's what?
I don't think that's a right statement to say as recommended, because it was only a few board members that recommended, and it wasn't something that was discussed at the time of the motion.
Could we say, was our intent to say possibly, in general, the size, bulk, and scale seem to be appropriate?
Yes.
I think that's in reference to the sculpture itself, which I think we are in agreement with.
Yeah.
Yes.
The size, bulk, and scale of the sculpture seem to be appropriate. Is that what our intent was?
Yes, I think.
Yes.
Because we're not making compatibility criteria findings, we were just making a statement about the future of making those findings. Correct?
I thought you were bringing up the issue of sensitivity to adjacent resources, but if that's...
We're talking, item C is just talking about the sculpture itself.
The First item C.
The first item C. It was just talking about the sculpture itself. So I think it seems to be a fair statement that item C could state, in general, the size, bulk, and scale of the sculpture seem to be appropriate. Is that a true statement?
Yes.
Then item D, you're the maker of the motion, that's why I'm looking at you.
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, my viewpoint is that it needed some adjustment.
Okay, that's why we wrote,
In
and we
height.
covered that. Some board members
location.
prefer relocating,
Yeah.
so we did say that. And now on to the second item C, which is item D. We wrote, the project is sensitive to the adjacent historic terminal, but exactly what we meant by that is kind of vague.
I would not agree with that statement the way it's stated there.
How would you prefer that statement be stated? How would you prefer?
What about scratching it?
You could say, I don't know how you want to. It was Paul that added that in right at the last minute, and it went very quickly, and so I'm not in.
My understanding is that you had several suggestions regarding the walk and maybe the adjustment. They may or may not come back to comply with those suggestions.
Right.
And so if you're adamant on any issue, that's what you should indicate clearly. I thought that you gave them some options to consider. There is a likelihood that they might consider some of the options, like the walkways, how you get access to the art, but they may not shift the artwork. And so
Right,
if that's
right.
okay, then you built in some flexibility to accept it.
So,
It sounds to me like the last item, which is item D, is an inappropriate statement to make considering the suggestions that we made earlier on in the motion, so that if we scratch that, it would not be confusing anymore.
Yeah,
yeah, can we just remove
I
it?
agree.
Just remove it.
Yeah, so I was going to
Does
say.
that sound good?
I would suggest that you just add, at the end of the statement, not to change that, your intent behind it, you add something to the effect, if some of the adjustments are, as suggested, are made. Because you're leaving it open to whatever adjustments they make, and not defining which adjustments. It's a little softer than what we had as far as making sure that they do it, that you follow their recommendations. They weren't recommendations, they were suggestions.
Okay.
Are you comfortable with that?
I just don't know how to state that.
So Jaime,
Because
you're
we-
saying don't eliminate D?
Don't eliminate D, and you're saying that you can approve it if they possibly make some adjustments. But don't call them recommendations. That's the only difference I'm distinguishing. So that way, Planning Commission knows that you had made some suggestions for some adjustments.
So it would read the project is sensitive, or we could say the project appears to be sensitive to the adjacent historic terminal with
Some minor adjustments.
some minor adjustments
As suggested.
as suggested.
Right.
I'm okay with that.
But we're talking about location here. We're not talking about design.
Well, I think it was location, adjust, shifting, or adding taking away some sidewalks.
Then then the statement should read the project location appears to be
Sensitive.
sensitive to the adjacent historic terminal with some minor adjustments
As suggested.
as suggested.
I like that.
Okay, Gloria, did you get that? Okay. Whew. What time is it?
Time to go.
Anything else on item 3?
No. Thanks.
Okay. That's good. Good clarifications. Item 4. Item 5. Item 6.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
item 6. Number 1C would add, so it states, study reducing the width of the curb cut off Anacapa Street in order to add more landscaping. That was the point. So please add that, in order to add more landscaping. And then there was also, part of the motion was was asking the applicant to submit the plan to the building department, which is perhaps not appropriate suggestion to make, but so I would like to, but my concern, the reason I had stated that, it's not even mentioned here, but the reason I had stated that is because the parking lot arrangement did not meet either current ADA standards or the minimum requirements for landscaping that is just part of the ordinance. So I would like to add number 4, the parking lot arrangement does not appear to meet current ADA standards or ordinance standards for landscaping.
I'm not so sure we can add another motion item to, because we didn't.
And I think their
State it.
defense was that this was a TI, tenant improvement, and not a full-scale site improvement.
It doesn't matter, though.
Yeah.
The building department will still require it. So
What I'm getting at is that I think that the motion should, if there were 3 motion items, there should remain 3 motion items, and there should be a clarification if needed.
Well, there was a 4th, and it didn't get included.
Okay.
There was a 4th item mentioned, and that was before returning to the board, submit the plan for preliminary review to the building department. And it's not even mentioned there. So my concern is that it doesn't come back to the board without some issues addressed that I know need to be addressed in that parking lot, because it's going to be a waste of our time again. So
You're making the suggestions so that you're trying to do them a favor so they don't waste their time and our time.
yes,
They heard that. I'm sure they heard that. I don't know if we need to add another. I wasn't here, and I had to step down for that motion, so I'd like everybody else's input on that one. Jaime?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would recommend that if you ever have a question about compliance, whether it be parking design, code design, that you ask staff to look into the matter. We can handle those type of issues by
Okay.
asking that it be referred, and we have preliminary checks that we work with these agencies on.
that's great.
So when you have that request, just make it on record, and Mr. Baumann will assure that it's routed to them before it returns.
All right. I'm good with that. Thanks.
Yeah.
And I would definitely route this project and this question.
We'll note that.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Anything else, Kirk, on item number 6?
No, thanks.
Item 7?
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
And just a revision to number 2 to read, provide a concealed structural connection at the post to beam and at the base to post. Detail. And then the second sentence, provide a base detail.
Okay.
That's all.
Item 8? Okay. All those in favor of the minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed? 1 abstention by Keith. Okay. Moving on to the consent calendar of May 7th. Can I have a motion to ratify the consent calendar of May 7th?
So moved.
Motion made by Keith,
I'll second it.
seconded by Paul.
For our consent calendar last week, May 7th, we had item A, 401 Shoreline Drive. Got a final approval with conditions. Item B, 500 Fowler Road. The review after final was approved with conditions, or with 1 condition. Item C, 220 Nogales Avenue was continued 2 weeks. Item D, 721 Carpinteria Street was continued 1 week. And consent last week was reviewed by Paul Zink and Chris Skillilan.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And then we have the consent calendar for May 14th. Can I have a motion to ratify that?
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Paul,
Second motion, Madam Chair.
seconded by Keith.
All right, consent calendar today, May 14th, we had item A, 721 Carpinteria Street, got a final approval with a condition. Item B, 3900 block of La Colina Road, got final approval with conditions. Consent today was reviewed by Paul Zink and Chris Skillilan.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Announcements. Any announcements, Tony? Anybody have any announcements? All right. Any subcommittee reports? Okay, we have a discussion item that is going to be made by Steve Wiley, City Attorney, on conflict of interest. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Wiley, and I have been asked recently by several members of the City Council and by the City Administrator to meet with the city boards and commissions and to talk to them about potential conflicts of interest, specifically about the state law, the Political Reform Act, that regulates when a conflict is apparent and is enforced by the Fair Political Practices Commission in Sacramento. And I'm starting with the Design Review Board because these conflict issues typically come up most often with Design Review Board members. And in fact, I'd say it's fairly rare for us to get this sort of thing with board members outside of the Design Review Boards. So you're our top priority. I've passed out some materials. I know some of you received them recently, so I apologize for the wasting paper. There's a lot here. It can be a bit overwhelming. I can tell you, having dealt with this for many years, it's a bit overwhelming even to me to read some of these things from the FPPC. They're pretty dense. They're pretty hard to follow. The main thing here is to give you this information, to allow you to use it to the extent you're so inclined to review it, and as I say, maybe not even understand it all, but possibly to spot issues, to at least have a sense of, well, maybe I have a conflict or a potential conflict in a certain case, and then to contact the city attorney's office and to have us talk you through it. I've given you each my email address. I think you know Scott Vincent, the assistant in our office. Scott's also very familiar with these questions. If I'm not available, feel free to give Scott a call or to email Scott. And as I say, maybe we can talk through your issues. It may be that there is an obvious answer, and more typically, the safe answer is it appears you have a conflict and you need to step down. And we might talk about how you do that. In one sense, that's the safest course. If there's any doubt, I think I would tell you to abstain, to step down, to not participate in a decision, because it avoids even the appearance of a conflict where someone accuses you of a conflict. And I don't think this is unique at all to Santa Barbara. Those things get in the newspaper, even an accusation. And in fact, the FPPC, until recently, whenever they got an email or a letter from a citizen, they would, quote unquote, initiate an investigation. And so that made for a headline in a lot of communities in the newspaper, FPPC initiates investigation. And all it meant was they did that every time they received any complaint, and it didn't mean there was any merits to the complaint. I've seen this happen recently with city council members. The other thing about the FPPC staff in particular, they're true believers, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Their interpretation is strict, and they're going to err on the side of finding a conflict and err on the side of warning people. We're going to send you a warning letter. Well, maybe you didn't do it this time, but we're warning you to be careful the next time. Or maybe you acted in good faith this time, and that's the end of it. But we're warning you not to be concerned about this in the future. And I don't think any of us want to see that, want to see you warned, or want to see the FPPC initiating an investigation. So, again, there's a lot here, but the main point is to see if you can, familiarize yourself with this, spot when you've got a potential concern or a question or a potential problem, and to feel free to contact the city attorney's office. If we're not sure, and if you would like a more definitive answer, which is often the case, we will help you, right, that number 7 here, ask the FPPC for informal advice. And I say informal because they have a formal process, but it's considerably elaborate. It takes about a year to 18 months to get a formal opinion letter because they consider that almost like a court decision, that it becomes official statewide policy of the FPPC. So they take, like I say, about 18 months to issue formal opinions. But you can get an informal opinion letter in a matter of weeks from the FPPC staff, and that's generally the way to go. The other thing I want to mention about asking the FPPC for advice, they will not answer any questions after the fact. You have to get to them before the issue has occurred, before you have taken some action, and ask them if you should do something in the future. And if you indicate that you did something in the past, they'll refuse to give you an opinion letter. And then you're in the awkward position of having advised them of something that possibly where you made a mistake. So you want to be careful about that. One of the things, two things in here are memos from the city attorney's office. One, a memo in 2005 regarding Government Code 1090. And I'm not really going to talk about that much today, but Government Code Section 1090 is an old statute that deals with when you contract with the city, if you were to contract, if you were actually to be hired by the city. And you have to be let me just say you have to be extremely careful about that. In your case, if, for example, you wanted to work on a project for the city, a city project that was going to go to the ABR, you basically couldn't do it. You could not work, because you're a member of the ABR, you could not work on a city project that was going to go to the ABR. And in fact, it would be an illegal contract. That contract could not be entered into. And like I say, this statute dates from the 1890s, and it was a reform thing, progressive reforms, where it was aimed at city council members and board of supervisors who used to get rich, basically getting elected to the city council, and then, the city needs to do all of its printing through my printing company. Or in counties, the county undertaker was often elected to the board of supervisors, and all the coroner's office got a contract with that undertaker, things like that. But when you think about it, the cities contract for a lot of things, and you have to be very careful when you contract, when you're actually going to work on a city project. Like I say, that doesn't come up too often, and that's the extent of what I'm going to say about Government Code Section 1090, other than the fact that there have been a lot of people who've made mistakes. About 15 years ago, the state superintendent of schools didn't realize, and he was a lawyer, although he wasn't a practicing lawyer, he didn't realize that his wife couldn't enter into a contract with the state superintendent of schools office, and he was paying his wife rent for their portion of their home, and she was a consultant for school districts, and she delivered these grant contracts to school boards, all from his office. He went to state prison for 5 years and was forever barred from holding public office again because he didn't have enough sense to know your office cannot contract with your wife. So, and I can give you other examples of mayors and council members who have gone to jail for violating Government Code 1090. So it's one of those, city attorneys consider it kind of the nuclear landmine of municipal law. You want to be real careful with that one. Most of the concerns that come up have to do, as I say, with design review boards and what you can do as a design professional in front of your own board. And I think you probably know there are some exceptions. There's one called the sole proprietor exception that allows you to prepare drawings and to answer drawings even when those drawings are submitted to the ABR. And there's also one called, and it's very similar to the sole proprietor, it's called the technical drawings. And I think maybe an easy way for me to explain this is less in the architect, for an architect, but let's say an engineer, civil engineer, structural engineer. It would be fairly common, say, for a structural engineer to be a member of a a project team, maybe to be on ABR and have prepared the structural drawings and answer questions about those drawings. There's no problem there. You can answer questions. You can't, though, you can't try to influence your own board. You can't try to influence the ABR. You can't essentially be the project leader who advocates for a project. That's not allowed by the sole proprietor exception. And it's the same situation with the technical drawings exception. So it's merely the preparation of the drawings. And let's say for an architect, you can prepare the architectural plans. You can answer any questions, are these the right date? Or do you have a roof plan? Do you have this? A member of the ABR may ask you, I don't understand what this means, and you can answer it. But you should not advocate for a project. You should, and some of this has to do with the way it works in Santa Barbara. One of the, when the FPPC wrote this guideline that said a sole proprietor can present to their own design review board, the first test is whether that project needs to be approved by the Planning Commission or not. And I think not all of your projects go to the Planning Commission. So actually, you can only make presentations as a sole proprietor when the project is also going to the Planning Commission. But as I say, not all of our projects, a project that is merely remodeling isn't necessarily going to be going to the Planning Commission. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to made an important statement right there. I just want to be clear about it. So did you say that only if your project is going to the Planning Commission can you thereby present and advocate for your project at ABR as well as Planning Commission? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, except that you used the verb advocate, and you have to avoid that, because that's the main point I want to make. The sole proprietor exception allows you to answer questions and to explain your drawings, but not to be what we often see. And this is the sort of the team leader that tries to influence the ABR to approve a project. It's more, and it's a fine line. I actually am recommending that if possible, you sit back here and let someone else make the presentation, do the advocacy, but be available to answer questions. I think if you take that approach, there'll be no question that you've followed the sole proprietor exception to the law, to the letter of the law, and then you don't have to be concerned, did I sound like an advocate? Was I trying to get this project approved? But yeah, it is important to remember that there's three tests, and the first one is this project going to the Planning Commission? Another point I should mention, this does not really apply to, say, the City Council. It gets into whether the board you're appearing in front of has budgetary, whether the ABR, in this case, has budgetary control over some other board. And we don't really have that in Santa Barbara, but just a clear example of what you could do. As a sole proprietor, you can present to the City Council, because they're not going to be unduly influenced by you being an ABR member, because they're just in the chain of command. That's not an issue.
Sorry to interrupt again,
Go
but again, so is that true of Planning Commission as well, that it's okay
Yes.
for an ABR member to advocate for their project in front of Planning Commission?
Yes, if you're a sole proprietor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, did you say that if the project is not scheduled to go to Planning Commission, then you're not allowed to present?
Right. You can't use the sole proprietor exception if the project is not going to the Planning Commission.
So
You can use the technical drawings exception and still be a person that works on the project and prepares your drawings. You just basically can't be the spokesperson.
Okay.
Steve, I think the reason we're all asking questions about that is because it affects all the architects on this board. And what it essentially is saying is that we as architects are hired to advocate for our clients. That's what we're hired to do. So I brought this up in our meeting at the Faulkner Gallery to you because I was concerned about it, and because I'm a sole proprietor, and there's nobody else that can advocate for my projects, and that would mean what you're essentially saying is that we can't take on projects in the city that require discretionary approval. We can't write modification letters because part of the modification letters are, why do we feel that this mod is appropriate? It's advocating for the project. We send and talk to staff on a daily basis for projects within the city about the appropriateness of our project, why we feel that our project should be approved, whether it's in an email to our planner or to city's counter staff or to the building department. So I think everybody's concerned about it because we're all not really knowing, we're not sure whether now we can, does it mean if we're on ABR we can't take projects within the city limits? That's what I think we're asking. That's what I'm asking.
And I think what you're saying is by and large accurate in terms of how difficult and how very narrow this sole proprietor exception is. And, I can't tell you whether you could ever make it work. I can say whether these are realistic alternatives. If there's another member of the project team that can make the presentation, and that may be an engineer, that may be the landscape designer who can make the presentation, or even the client can say, I'm comfortable enough to explain my project, and if you're just there to answer questions.
But you're not talking about just the presentation, you're talking about correspondence with staff.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's really, yes, and that's where people tend to think, okay, so I have to abstain, I step down and leave the room, but the real critical thing is you can't communicate with staff. I think there's almost a presumption that the staff would be unduly influenced by emails and phone calls from an ABR member. Whether that's really true in the Santa Barbara context, that's how the FPPC sees it. And so that line of just answering questions versus advocacy is easy to cross. And, for example, when you initiate the contact, it sounds like advocacy. Whereas if you're just responding to a question, and then let's say it's an email and it's well documented, and they ask you, what are the date of the most current drawings, and you give them the date, that's not a problem. But I think you're right. I think it forces you to find some other way for somebody to advocate for your project, and that's difficult.
Clear as mud.
Well, I think, so I just want to talk more specifically then about, for example, a planning commission letter to the planning commission where that involves, or to the show staff hearing officer for modification, where you are trying to explain discretionary approval, why something should be approved, which, there's always the sort of gray area when it's discretionary, right? Mm-hmm. How is it really affecting the neighbors? How is it really, affecting the neighborhood? Is it appropriate for the neighborhood? And so does that mean we need to have our client sign that letter or someone on our...
Going back, you're okay in front of the planning commission. You don't...
It is submitted to the city staff.
Right, and I think I'm going to think this one through, but offhand, I think you're okay for a staff hearing officer, because that's a separate process. The actual regulation says, does, in this case, the ABR, have any budgetary control over that other board or commission? And I would view the staff hearing officer as like a commission, board or commission. You don't have any budgetary control over them. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to mention kind of the obvious, because all of us have also, or many of us have been involved in city approval processes for many, many years. And I can remember, for example, the first time that I was on the board where there was chairpersons who were heads of large architectural firms or partners in large architectural firms and had big projects coming and being approved or considered and reviewed by the ABR. And most of the time, I think almost at that time, they would step down. They would have someone else from their staff present. But there wasn't any suggestion that they were somehow compromising, state law by writing letters or talking to staff. I mean, those kinds of issues just didn't come up. And in fact, I would go as far to say that they were hired in some cases by the public because they were on the board, and that they not only understood the process, but they knew people, they knew staff people. It's because of their influence that they were hired.
Right.
So it seems like a huge change from what it was, 8 years ago.
Well, I think it's just more, number one, the regulations haven't changed, the laws haven't changed. These date from about 1985, or even, the act itself was 1974, and the regulations were in the late 70s, and then the sole proprietor exception was for 1985. But just to be clear, when someone is a member of a larger firm, a partner or an associate or an employee, someone with the technical ability to make the presentation can do that. That's legal. But the architect who worked on the project cannot be involved, cannot contact staff, cannot be sending emails or phone calls. And I hear what you're saying, that happened. For years, City Attorney's Office said, we're not the conflicts cop. And I still say that. I'm not going to run in here, and tackle somebody. It's like, I'm not your lawyer. I don't work for the FPPC. And part of it is like, we would hope the FPPC understands that in a small community like Santa Barbara, some of these rules just aren't all that practical, and the concerns you're saying. So, but in recent years, I think it's best to keep you well informed, and so that you understand these things. And again, we're not going to be tackling people, and what we're saying is you need to understand them yourself and remove yourself, or a project opponent or somebody is going to accuse you of violating the law.
Okay.
And I do think that there have been mistakes made, and they were probably all in good faith because it's so complex and people haven't understood it.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Okay, again, please call me or email me.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. We're a little behind to item number 1, the Sycamore Creek Punta Gorda Street. Hi. What?
Record.
The last time we saw this project was April 30th. And we made 8 comments in the motion. Do you want to go through those, or do you want me to read them? If you want to go through them one by one, we can save some time reading them. Does that sound like a good idea? Okay. And your names for the record?
Yes, for the record, Jessica Grant, project planner in the Public Works Department, and John Lawson, project engineer manager for the project. And John will be bringing you through the ABR's last set of comments.
Thank you, Jessica. John Lawson, project engineer in the engineering division. Excuse me, we're just passing out material right now. Let's see. Oops, sorry. Okay, thank you. We're returning from the last ABR meeting regarding this project, and what I'd like to do is just go over the motion items as part of staff's presentation. So with that, I'd like to start off with motion number 1. Utility pipes are not to be visible. I'd like to direct your attention, Madam Chair, members of the board, to a plan sheet called typical section S9. What you see in front of you is engineering drawing that shows the proposed pipelines that will be underneath the bridge this time, as opposed to what we presented prior being on the side of the bridge, where there was concerns that the pipelines would be viewed through the bridge railing. So as you can see here now, the pipelines are underneath the bridge here. And also, I just handed out some 3D renderings of what our bridge engineer has put together, of more or less what it would look like. You would not see the pipelines if you were to be standing on the bridge. You definitely need to go underneath the bridge to see the pipelines. So the bridge engineer did a good job in coming up with a design to address the concerns of the board.
All right. That's a good one. Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. Motion number 2, and motion number 2 actually will follow into motion number 3 regarding the Southern California Edison pole that we talked about. The Southern California Edison and staff have been working on a design where we can relocate this large pole. Again, the pole is a 6 to 7 foot diameter, the foundation of the pole is 6 to 7 foot diameter, but the exposed part, or the exposed pole, is about 3.5 to 4.5 feet in diameter at its widest point, which is at the base. What you see in front of you, if I could, is the site plan, one site plan that would hopefully clarify the location of the proposed tubular steel pole. At this time, Edison is working on another alternative rather than having the pole here at this location. So right now this is tentative. Edison has not committed to this design, but we wanted to show the board potentially where it can be. It is just one of those options that was brought up in our last meeting. Again, the tubular steel pole is at the side of the bridge, but this time around we designed it to be out of the sidewalk area. What you see here in dash is the outline of the tubular steel foundation, and in darker line work is the pole itself. Oh, yes.
Right here.
And here's the sidewalk that was originally shown in the sidewalk area the last time we met. So we did have Edison put the pole outside the sidewalk area. And in case you want to know what it would look like, we also have 3D renderings of the tubular steel pole if it were to be installed at this location as shown on the map, or on the plan, excuse me. This right here.
All right.
Okay. Motion number 3, it's tied into number 2. This is the plan view that we want to show you. It's an exhibit. This is actually an excerpt from the construction plans itself. So what we're doing is just trying to make it simplified. Rather than flip through a lot of 38 sheets, we had an exhibit created, but this line work or layout is directly from the construction plans. So in this plan view that you see in front of you is the proposed location of the bus stop and the street lights. These are existing bus stop and an existing street light that's going to be repositioned into the new sidewalk area.
This is
Yes.
existing trash receptacle.
Bus stop. Thank you, Jessica. And also you could see the proposed sidewalk area as well. Okay.
Chain link fencing and wrought iron fencing?
Oh, yes. Item number 4, show exact locations of chain link and wrought iron fencing. I'd like to have you direct your attention to the plan set itself. I've actually color-coded, so if you could open up the tab, the blue or light blue tab. The proposed chain link fence is a black vinyl chain link fence that's going to delineate the city's right-of-way of the creek. So you'll see here in graphical X's here, that would represent the chain link fence, the black vinyl chain link fence.
So again, the right-of-way in the area of the creek is 60 feet wide. So basically, top of bank to top of bank, we would be at the top of bank putting the chain link fence. And the reason for the fence, because we're going to be going to do a big restoration effort on the banks, and we didn't want the adjacent properties or people going into the recently restored areas, but we would like to also keep it as a permanent fence. The city's is dealing with encroachment issues on both sides of the property of the former Deluxe property and the Green Mobile Home Park. So we would like to keep a large or 8-foot fence at those lines.
So 6 foot.
6 foot, I'm sorry. Yes.
And the wrought iron was just that little section that was in front of the new pole?
Yes, Madam Chair. The wrought iron, if I could direct your attention to the plan sheet that's tabbed in yellow. So the only wrought iron fence is going to be at the bridge railing.
Which is right here?
Yes, correct.
In here?
Yes,
Here. 3 locations.
yes, Madam Chair.
And how high is that?
I actually have dimensions for you in on the plan sheet tab in green. The proposed wrought iron fence is 3 foot 6 inches high.
All right.
Okay, item number 5, show the finished pattern of the sandstone and sidewalks. The sidewalk is actually going to be plain colored concrete gray. There was misinformation on that from last meeting. So all the sidewalks are just going to be plain gray. In regards to the sandstone pattern, the only sandstone pattern that we're going to apply on the project is on the retaining wall, about 2 to 3 foot retaining wall that's at the pathway, the 5-foot pathway along the the east bank of the creek.
Do you have an elevation of that?
Yes. Madam Chair, we don't have an elevation of that actually. We only have it shown as on plan view, and it is the, yes,
just to narratively describe it, the retaining wall, there's a little pathway that's on the east bank.
Show us in plan view,
Sure.
Jessica. Because then we can
But
maybe
yeah,
understand it a
yeah.
little
And
bit
if you
more.
were, yeah, I'll wait till we.
Okay. Sheet 19 of the plan set. North. The east bank here. The retaining, right now, the retaining wall is going to be here to hold up the 5-foot pathway. Right now, we don't have it called out on the plan. I'd like to apologize for that, but it's a 2 to 3 foot wall, decorative wall really, and it's going to be next to this abutment wall here.
And if you were standing on the pathway, you would actually be, the pathway is the top of the wall. So you would see it from the, if you were walking along the sidewalk and were to look off onto the bank, that's where you would see that 2-foot section.
2 feet high?
Yes.
2 to 3 feet
2
high.
to 3.
How far does it go?
Right now, we are looking at, right now it's just a design concept right now, but we are looking at approximately 6 feet in length.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay.
Okay.
Real quick on the, I know there was a inquiry on the pattern to be used. I've printed out cut sheets of the proposed manufacturer custom rock form liner. And this is a typical method that they use in the Ortega Street Bridge. But this form liner is what we are thinking of using, proposing of using into applying it on the retaining walls itself. This is not going to be applied in the abutment walls of the bridge. As I mentioned in our last meeting, the abutment walls will be mostly covered with this creek slope. So this is what you will see, or something similar to this for the retaining walls itself, only the retaining walls. Oh, yes, yes. We'll just move on to number 6, look for ways to add mature planting whenever possible to deter potential graffiti and to screen the power pole. Again, the power pole is not a design commitment yet, but we will find ways to provide any type of planting around the pole. Again, the pole is about 85 feet high, so there's always so much planting we could put. We can't put 85-foot planting, but we'll definitely try to, we'll definitely put planting to deter graffiti vandalism.
Did you show that somewhere on the plan?
Yes. I'm just going to refer to the landscape plans. We don't have the actual planting design that would go around the pole. Again, Edison doesn't have, or is not committed to that design yet. So basically the planting is going to be consistent with the planting plan that our licensed landscape architect has prepared. So, in other words, we don't have a planting plan yet for the pole. It's just
Okay.
the pole itself is not. Edison hasn't committed to that design yet. But again, the planting is going to be consistent with what's being proposed already on the landscape plan.
Okay, anything else? I think we're,
I believe that's it. Number 7, just show you've seen this already. The bus stop and the trash receptacles on that one exhibit.
we saw that.
Yes.
Yeah.
that concludes staff's presentation.
All right, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this item? Okay, back to the board with questions. Stephanie?
I'm just trying to figure out which things where you're using that stone and what are you calling retaining walls and what are you calling wing walls and what are you calling abutments?
Oh, yes, just real clear, abutments are the retaining walls for the bridge. What I was,
But is it on this plan somewhere?
You have to turn your mic on, too.
Is it on
the
this
2 to
plan?
3 foot high walls are not shown on the plan. What I tried to describe on here was the general location.
So the only place you're showing that or doing that stone is in that little tiny section?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Not right now.
Keith? No? Paul?
Two questions. One is, can you show where the connection is between the chain link fence that's going to be on the right-of-way, the property line, and how it's going to connect to the wrought iron, or how it's going to connect to the bridge? And then the second question is, on the east side where you have this path, is there going to be a pedestrian gate, and where is that shown? So, if you don't have the answer yet, that's okay.
Right.
Oh, actually, we're just trying to refer any sheets to you to answer your question.
Just turn to them. If you know how to answer it, just turn to the sheet and put it and do it right here so that everybody watching at home can see it.
I think it's just flush up against the railing and the wrought iron. Yeah, it'd probably be like a couple inches.
Mr. Zink, to answer your question regarding first the chain link fence, on sheet C7,
This is not sheet C7.
I'm sorry, number 7, sheet 7,
Oh, okay.
yes. We are planning to bring that up to the bridge, again, to delineate the right-of-way.
the chain link fence
Yes.
is going to be on this retaining wall part, or is it going to be on the right-of-way?
Oh, that's the only location because of that 5
yeah.
foot pass. So we would be 5 feet over.
Okay.
Okay.
So is this a pedestrian path for everyone to take, like normal people, or is it just for maintenance people?
Actually,
It's open for anyone to take. That's kind of like the off the beaten path. It's during the times that we've been out at the site, our observations that a lot of the neighborhood traffic to cut through to schools or other parts of the neighborhood, that path is well used, and we wanted to maintain that 5 foot path. On the property line, so that's the only case other than the 60-foot right-of-way. I think the biggest emphasis for us for having a fence is on the other side of the street. But in this case, there's private property fences that are delineating the right-of-way line there. And then there would, again, be underneath this is that retaining wall that's about 2 to 3 feet high. And then I think yet to be determined, we're showing the fence there. But as I understand it, it would be then to end the fence, it would be one of the poles that would be flush up against the
concrete.
Yeah,
along the side.
right. And then at some points, we would have some sort of man gates to get to do maintenance.
The man gates would actually be
right.
going this direction, but
Right.
you're allowing pedestrian traffic, public traffic this
It-
direction.
yes.
And that's what my question
Yes.
really was about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any more? Gary, no? Kirk?
I have a couple questions. So on that same page, it looks like there are several spots where the chain link comes right up to the bridge railing. And so so the bridge railing is 3.5 feet high, and then the fence is going to stick up above that? At those points? Is that?
Yes. That would be. As shown on the plan, that's correct.
But so
Right.
has it started sloping down here already or not?
No, that path is level.
Okay.
Yes.
So my question is, since this is only 3.5 feet high, couldn't the fence for some distance along here also be 3.5 feet high? Instead of having
Yes, that technically that could be done.
Yeah.
All right. The other question I had was on this photograph of the stonework, it looks like there's variations in color,
Yes.
which I like,
Okay.
because I noticed in the photographs that you showed last time
Yes.
of examples that have already been done that it looked very uniform in color, and there wasn't this variation. So I'm just wondering if that is the variation planned, or is it to match what has happened before?
What we showed in the last meeting was just a sample of Ortega Bridge. We want to just convey that there would be some type of pattern, a sandstone pattern. As far as using that particular method that was used on Ortega Bridge, I recall there was from the board that there was a dislike of the pattern of Ortega Street Bridge. But so what I'm bringing to you right now is just a cut sheet of what we think we want to use, and to try to pretty much
You can spec in the
consistent.
color.
Yes,
You can
try to be
spec in.
consistent with all the other bridges out there.
Right.
So this is the form liner our bridge engineer has used in his experience, and it's a custom rock. Not to advocate for custom rock, but this is a leader in this type of form liner technology. But if something like this particular color the board likes to see, this is actually what they call their product line, large sandstone ashlar. Yes, we can put this in our plans and specifications.
Okay, thanks.
Chris?
That it? Okay. I had the same fencing questions, so those were answered. The only other question I have is on this loose sheet S9 that you brought with you, showing the pipes underneath.
Oh, yes, yes.
Is there any way those can be recessed further? It looks like you have some room to work with there.
Oh, push it up more.
Yeah.
Because we're working with, let me see, I think the largest pipeline that's out there is a 6-inch diameter, but Southern California Gas Company is going to upgrade that to an 8-inch diameter. So what you see on the section here, there's actually, I like to say it to scale. Yes, it is to scale. So we could try to recess it some more, but what we wanted to at least convey to the board that it's being hidden.
Okay.
If you were to stand on top of the stand on the bridge looking down, you wouldn't see anything.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it just looked like there was a little bit of room. So if you can recess that, because there are other views, not just from the bridge, but
Right,
from,
right,
from other
right.
areas. No, just a question. So.
No, that's a good note.
Do you want to go ahead with comments?
Sure. I don't really have any other than if you can recess the exposed pipes further.
I could definitely work with the engineer with
Okay,
this.
thanks. Sorry.
And then
I'm just
again-
going to try to
Yeah, and then,
interneat a lot of back and forth, but
I
just
think
say
you're probably
yes,
going to
that's
address the
good.
fence issue. So I'll go ahead. So that's it.
In my head, but I say yes.
Kirk?
Okay, yeah. A few comments that the chain link fencing, a study reducing the height of the chain link fencing as it approaches the bridge in all locations that it does so to match the railing height on the bridge. And I would say for at least 10 feet, but if you can go further, that would be great. And then I don't know how other board members feel, but I like the ashlar rock pattern that was presented today, as opposed to what's been done on previous bridges. And I do like the variation in color that's indicated there, as well as the pattern that's indicated.
Thanks, Kirk.
And then the last comment was this is kind of a carryover, and I don't know how the board members feel, but it seems like since it's such a gorgeous thing that you're doing with this bridge, that just a slight enhancement of the sidewalk treatment might be appropriate. And this is what I suggested last time, is that maybe just something, an enhanced pattern, like a diamond pattern or something, to distinguish it from just the standard city sidewalk. So those are my comments.
Thanks. Gary?
Just to reiterate Chris' comment, I saw the same thing, that the pipe support should be placed to the upper portion of the bridge rather than suspend lower to the bridge. So as long as that bracket is at the upper portion, it gives the opportunity for the installation to be raised or lowered regardless of pipe diameter. And as far as the pattern goes, the first go-around, I was under the assumption that most of the buttresses were going to have the ashlar pattern. And when I looked at the existing photos, it appeared to me that the existing bridge did have sandstone supports, that they had that basic standard pattern. And I thought we were going with that direction. And I'm kind of disappointed to hear that only the small section by the path is done in that pattern. And I know Ortega Bridge was not done like that. Ortega Bridge, the entire buttresses were done in the pattern, and so was the Haley Street Bridge.
I think we're going to need further clarification on that exact pattern. Today they're looking for project design approval. So
I'm talking about the quantity, the areas that they are
I think that's going to
proposing.
come up too, because it's unclear yet exactly the extent of.
Well, in
walls
my
that they
opinion, in that they should continue it on those walls. I just
Okay.
want to make
Did
that
you hear that?
I think
clear.
we need to clarify from the existing bridge versus the proposed bridge that you will not be seeing any side wing walls, that everything is, I think maybe we can clarify through the section, but there will be some exposed concrete, like 2 feet underneath the existing bridge, but it doesn't go beyond that. So you'd have to be in the creek to see underneath
the bridge.
the bridge.
Okay. Any more comments, Gary?
And those were just my comments.
Thanks. Paul?
The only positive thing is I'm glad it's not a 6-foot diameter power pole. And then the other thing is I'm glad you located it into the actual creek bed itself and in part of that landscaping. And if you can happen to push it far enough away so it's within an arm's reach length from being a pedestrian on the bridge, it all depends on how much Edison will allow you to push it away because they have to access it. But right now, as soon as somebody can put a poster on that or something, but it would be good to push the power pole that you're putting in an arm's length away from the bridge. Or more, exactly.
Anything else?
That's all.
Keith? Thanks. Keith. Thanks. Stephanie?
I would be surprised if you couldn't see underneath this bridge from this pathway along here. That was my comment. My only comment being, it seems like you can't see underneath that bridge, contrary to what you're saying. Being on the bridge, obviously, you can't see underneath the bridge, but you made this nice walkway for the whole neighborhood. And it kind of veers into the center, across the center of the bridge. You would think that one could see that.
Agreed.
Okay.
Okay. I think we're going to need a little clarification on that. I don't have anything else to add. I think everything else has been said. So I would be looking for some kind of a motion, whether the board feels this project is ready for project design approval or if it needs to come back.
Madam Chair, could I
Yeah,
just
oh, yeah.
mention if
I didn't
you
see
are,
you.
hi, if you are making a motion to approve, to make sure that you include the conditions of approval.
Oh, yeah.
And I did give you a
I
copy.
do have those sitting right
and
here.
I've also added the ones that the Planning Commission had requested.
So we
before.
have a couple of design design review conditions of approval. One would be the screened backflow device. I'm looking at Gary because he always makes those comments. Screened backflow devices. Revegetation and anti-graffiti coating. And those were the ones.
And then later on, at the end,
Add some more, you said?
we added the two about the signage, no dumping signs, and,
And those were in our previous minutes.
right, so I just put them in the conditions of approval.
Anti-dumping, native landscaping, and you put those in there as well, so.
Yeah, so they're all included.
So those would all be included. Okay. Anybody?
Madam Chair, I will make a motion for project design approval with the following comments. But I'm going to preface the comments by responding to Gary's suggestion about the portions, supporting portions underneath the bridge. Last time when the presentation was made, it was clear that those buttresses were much larger.
Is this a comment or a motion? Because do we want to,
guess it's a
you want to
clear-
make another comment? You just-
I want to preface my motion
go
by
ahead.
comment, and that was on the elevation sheets. That light green, I believe it's light green, isn't it? The elevations? Yeah. So the presentation,
So we're talking about.
yeah, this is what we're talking about. Yeah, these, yeah. And what are you calling those? The term?
They're called abutment walls.
Okay, so abutment walls, yeah. So last time I remember very, very clearly you're making this presentation because on the other bridges, those abutment walls are much more exposed, and that's why it made sense to have an enhanced treatment, whereas in this case, it very much looks like part of the bridge and not very exposed at all. And so in my view, it works just fine the way it's presented. So that's why I'm
Okay,
not addressing
I get
that
it.
in my comments. So my comments are, study moving the power pole at least an arm's length away from the bridge railing. Further recess the pipe underneath the bridge as far as possible. The ashlar stone pattern presented is acceptable. Study enhancements in the sidewalk patterns. And study lowering the chain link fence adjacent to the bridge for at least 10 feet as it approaches the bridge to a height to match the bridge railing.
Thanks, Kirk. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Paul. I had one item that may be a carryover of item 6, or just something about the board looks forward to a detailed planting plan for this project or something like that, because that was item number 6, what hadn't really been addressed yet, and it was regarding the mature planting around the power pole.
We can include that. And then also the comment, just carry over the comment made about the planning commission items.
Condition and the conditions of approval,
Right,
So-
subject to all those conditions.
subject to the conditions
As mentioned in our previous
as mentioned in our previous motion and as detailed under the,
We have
The
a whole
project
list of
conditions of
conditions of
approval.
approval, not just those, but there's like 13 pages of them that were included in your staff report previously.
Okay.
So the motion needs to include all of those.
so just the blanket statement saying that this motion includes approval of the conditions as presented with the addition of the planning commission recommendations. Okay.
Just for a point of clarification, it's planting around the pole.
That was another comment. That was separate than what we're just talking about. We're talking about conditions of
Yes,
approval,
separate,
these, and we're talking about the 2 additional ones. Yeah. Anything else? All those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. One abstention. One abstention by Keith. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. We get that copy. Okay, we're a little behind, quite a little bit behind. And on to item number 2, 501 Niños Drive.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
One clarification about that last item. Can that return to consent or full board?
Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't make that clarification. How do we feel about that?
I would say that if they can't, if the power pole is going to be moving in a different location, it needs to come back to full board. But if it's going to stay basically in the creek area and not adjacent to a sidewalk, it can go to consent.
Can we make that statement in the,
Do we need to revote?
do we need to add that to the motion or not, Tony?
Yes, you should add it.
Okay, so we're going to reopen the motion to add a comment that says that the project can go to consent if the location of the power pole does not change. That would be the addition. Is it okay for the maker of the motion and the seconder?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. One abstention. Keith. Okay, thanks. Okay, item 2, 501 Niños Drive. Do we have anybody to make that presentation?
There might be a speaker in the audience that needs to have a speaker slip.
If there's anybody that wants to file, yeah, do you want to speak on this project? Okay, never mind. Do we have anybody to present this project? Yes. Okay, sit down. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is a new item. A proposal to replace the softball field lighting for the Dwight Murphy Ball Field. What is all this, Tony? These are copies for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Your name for the record.
My name is Patrick Shanahan. I'm with Public Works for the city, and I'm here today to talk about our replacement project for the softball lights at Dwight Murphy.
All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we didn't.
Okay, here we go. Our project is to replace the existing softball lights at Dwight Murphy with new softball lighting. Includes poles, fixtures, new control system, basically a whole brand new system at Dwight Murphy. The project entails removing all 8 light poles and fixtures and replacing them with 7 light poles and fixtures. We will
Does everybody know where Dwight Murphy is? Do you want to just tell everybody where that is to refresh everybody's memory?
Okay. Dwight Murphy is down near the water across from the zoo. It's the park there that has a soccer field, it has a softball field, and it has a locker room, concession, restroom facility along with it. And so basically our plan here is to remove the existing lights and install 7 new poles and fixtures. We will eliminate 30 fixtures, replace it with 21 new fixtures, and through that we can create a much more even, uniform lighting level on the softball field for the players, as well as reduce energy consumption by 21%. Additionally, the new system comes with a new set of controls that will be integrated with the city network and will allow the Parks and Recreation staff to control the lights from their workstation in their office or someplace else. It'll eliminate the need for them to actually drive to the facility to turn the lights on and off when people need to use the field.
You mentioned that there was an elimination of one of them, right? Do you want to go over which one and how they're moving?
This one, this second sheet shows that. The gray circles are the existing light fixtures, or excuse me, light poles with fixtures, and the black ones are the new ones where they'll be installed, along with their basic, their dimensions that are based off of home plate. So you'll have 2 along the third baseline, 2 along the first baseline, 2 in left field, and 1 in right field. And our goal here, again, it's twofold. It's to basically create a much more uniform lighting level that's standard across the outfield and the infield, as well as to achieve the energy savings. Again, 21%, so that's a lot. These fixtures are outdated. They're old. They're inefficient. We're proposing to replace them with new, modern fixtures that are full cutoff, so they eliminate they comply with night sky, and they're engineered and located so they provide all of their light directly onto the playing field, eliminating light trespass off of the field.
As seen by the photometric.
The photometrics here will show you the lighting levels that they provide. If you look at your photo packet, there's the very last photo is an example of an installed case of a similar scale. This is the same company that provides this. This is a recreational ball field, and you can really see how the light levels die off outside of the field. So based on the location of the poles and the fixtures and how they're angled, they can really basically get all the light onto the playing field where it needs to be, provide the right amount of lighting levels with minimal waste in light and energy.
All right. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. I have one speaker slip. Francis Kliza. All right. Come on up here, Francis, and sit down in that chair and speak into that microphone.
Yeah, I've lived directly across from the baseball field at 129 Port Lamar Circle. And I am on the second floor. And I really wondered if you really need new lighting there, especially 20 feet higher than it is now. It looks pretty bright to me as it is. And I'm wondering about, well, you say that it diminishes as you leave the field.
That's what he's saying, yeah.
Yeah. Is that true?
We have to believe him.
Yeah, I have to accept.
For the moment.
Right. And I don't know about the new type of lighting, how much brighter it is. I'm questioning that. But 20 feet higher? You know, it seems pretty bright as it is. I've seen many a game in 20 years.
Francis, just keep making, he's not going to respond to you because this is your chance to talk, so just make your comments, and then I would suggest, if your questions are not answered, because we don't ask them, for instance, as we go around, you can ask him later for specific answers to your questions.
Yeah, I don't know procedures because I've never been
That's
to...
okay, that's why I'm telling you.
Yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot. Okay, questions from the board? Chris?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. A couple questions. On this cut sheet drawing, there's an electrical components enclosure shown on this pole. Is that part of this application? Will it be on every pole? Can you talk more about that?
Yes, it will be on every pole.
And we need, so size and at what height, and do you know what the size is of that
I
enclosure?
don't know of the size. It's not too large. It's not going to be at a lower level because it has to be out of the way of the players because they wrap the poles with pads. So it's high enough where you would have to intentionally access it for maintenance and stuff. It won't be much larger than the diameter of the pole.
Okay, but we don't have a current exact size at this point.
I don't have that information for you.
And then do you plan to paint these certain color, these poles and the lights?
The poles are galvanized steel with an additional anti-corrosive protection because it's so close to the ocean.
Okay.
So that's what they would be.
And I guess the last question, is 70 feet necessary for the ones that are currently 50?
The pole heights were selected for a couple of reasons. One is that the higher poles allow the light to be directed more downwards at a 30-degree angle, which is the optimal angle for for ball field lights that would eliminate glare for the players on the field. Additionally, lower poles closer to the infield, like in this area, become more susceptible to foul balls and damage. So the higher the pole, the safer the light fixtures are, really.
Okay, and then my last question, was there just trying to gauge how much brighter this will be, was there an existing photometric study done, and is there a way to compare the two arrangements?
Well, we're not really significantly increasing the light levels on the field. Our targets were 20-foot candles for the outfield and 30 for the infield, which is basically where we are today. The improvements here, though, are it's going to be much more uniform. It's sporadic out there. You'll have dark spots and light spots.
And less trespass on the outside.
Correct. And so what we were going for is not necessarily increasing the lighting levels, but just creating a more uniform, better product.
Okay. That's it.
Kirk?
Madam Chair, just one question. On the cut sheet, it looks like there's potential for a second row. There's a top row of 3 and then a potential second row of 2. Do you know which configuration it's going to be?
They each pole will have 3 fixtures.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm just going to comment to the person who, the public who asked the question about the lighting levels. In addition to the comments already made about keeping the basic level of light on the field as what it is currently, these fixtures are also heavily hooded, both on the side and the top, so that the light spill over into the street and around surrounding houses is reduced from what it currently is. I'm done. Thanks.
Great.
Yeah, the only question I really have is it has to do with the same component box. Do you have a main switchgear area where all of these are going to end up feeding to?
The controls and everything will be in the locker room, restroom facility. Everything will be inside of there.
Do you know if this manufacturer makes a pole standard without this control box at each fixture? That can be in the main control room?
I don't believe so. If you look at their other installations, they're all basically the same. They have these lights at City College. They have them at UCSB for their athletic fields, and all of the lights basically have the same box on the pole.
Okay.
Any more questions, Gary?
Nope, that's the only question.
The padding that the poles will be wrapped with, what color would they be, and what color are they right now? Do you have any idea?
Right now, I believe some of the photos would address what they are right now, but
What would you propose?
Parks and Rec is going to order brand new ones once we get these installed. I believe right now that they're brown. I want to say that
They
they're
look brown.
a brown.
And then a question for staff: when applicants do the photometrics, do they need to go like 5 or 10 feet outside their property line to show any light spill, just to prove that it is close to zero that's behind the fixture?
Yes, we usually get that when we ask for photometrics.
Okay. And I believe it'll be necessary at some point to have a little wider field for your photometrics just to show that there isn't light spill and it's good for the neighbors to see.
Is that it? Keith?
No.
Stephanie?
I have a question about the number of and the locations and how they were located in this delivery that you provided.
Yes.
Looks like there are 3 poles maybe lighting this whole field.
I believe there would have to be at least 4. There's one in the foreground you might not be able to see.
Yeah, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
But they're lighting this whole field. Is that because there are more fixtures?
Turn on your mic.
Is that because there are more fixtures on the pole?
Well, I can't answer how they designed that field. With our field here at Dwight Murphy, our goal was to try and put them back as close to where they were, as close as possible. But with the new technologies and better lighting, we discovered we were actually able to eliminate one pole. So the one that was out in far right field was the one that was eliminated. Additionally, there's existing underground trenching that we're going to utilize the maximum extent possible. So that's
I guess my question is, why couldn't they be even more eliminated?
He doesn't know.
Okay.
We can make a comment to ask him to research that if we want later.
That's it.
Right?
Mhm.
Comments? Why don't you start with comments?
I would say I appreciate the you guys trying to be more sensitive to the neighbors by eliminating some light poles, one light pole, and casting the light downward for more cutoff and more effective lighting for the players. However, it would seem that you could perhaps eliminate even further if you maybe studied the photometrics to see if more lights on fewer poles would work.
Any more comments?
That's it.
Thanks, Stephanie. Keith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's a good project for the energy conservation and minimizing the light pollution. I think there's just a few more details that we need to see, perhaps the fuller photometric study, just to kind of prove that the light spill is minimized or eliminated, and just some of the color selections and pads and things like that. I don't have a problem with the utility boxes. I think given the scale of the poles and the fixtures and everything, I think they fit in. So I think it's a good project, and we just need to dot a few I's.
Thanks. Thanks, Keith.
I think it's a great project as well. The photometrics thing is important, and I think for the community to understand that these are new fixtures that are going to prevent light from going behind the fixture, and that was the intent there. Like Keith said, just a couple of minor details, and we'll be good to go.
Thanks, Paul. Gary?
I agree with the other comments with the second I still would prefer to see that controller pull box be combined into in the utility closet for both visual reasons of the utility box and accessibility. I think it would be easier to work on if it was in a utility room rather than hanging up on having to get a bucket truck to work on them. So my only comment would be to study looking into relocating those boxes on the poles.
Thanks, Gary. Kirk?
No comments.
Chris?
I guess the only thing I would add is if the boxes cannot be removed from the poles, that we have an exact dimension and height for those said electrical components enclosures.
Okay, great. This item we can take action on if we feel that it's ready to take action on action of some sort, meaning it would be project design approval with comments and details to return.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion for project design approval, returning it back to consent for final, with the comments that the board is appreciative of the reduction of the number of poles and a reduction in the number of light fixtures. We understand that there is an increase in height due to the design configuration, but the benefit is going to be less light spill behind the fixture. We look forward to the applicant bringing back to the board a photometric study that goes beyond the pole fixtures, and to work with staff on whether it's 5 or 10 or 20 feet behind the poles for the distance. Second comment is to bring a photograph of the pole that's being presented showing the components box, and it is encouraged to find the smallest, most minimal component box that the manufacturer has available, or study removing it completely. Bring a color sample, or a sample to indicate the color of the padding that's going to go around the base of the poles, and indicate what the color of the poles would be. I think that's it.
All right. Is there a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Keith. Under discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Good job. Moving on to item number 3, 900 Calle de los Amigos. This is a final review of something, the non-residential common building. And we've got new plans being substituted. Is that all right, Tony? We have new plans?
We have new plans. We changed.
Final approval?
We have colors now that we can show you because we've gotten preliminary approval from a committee, our internal Viverde committee. So we did change that, and we changed some of the light fixtures because we went through committee and had the light.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
You're on, actually. You just want to close it.
Yeah, you have to sit down, otherwise it doesn't pick up on you. Tony, is it okay that we look at these? All right.
Just to clarify, I'm not asking for final today. I'd like to do final on consent because if the board is okay with our proposed colors, then we're going to paint one of the existing buildings, have everyone review it, and there may be slight tweaks,
Okay.
and then we'll have to come back final on consent with that final color variation.
Name for the record before you keep going.
My name is Justin Van Mullum. I'm with On Design Architects.
Come back. Don't leave. All right.
Okay, so just to refresh everyone's memory, we are right on Calle de los Amigos. So you go over the bridge and then you get to the kind of this main building here, and it is the existing right here. You can kind of see there's quite a few trees that are one of them. This one has died, but this one will remain. And let's see, you can see the existing building. We're going to keep this existing building. We'll be stuccoing the block. And then there's a lot more to it. Like this is backside. It looks like one building when you look at it, but some of the roofs are connected, and these are some of the kind of outlying buildings. So this is the main building we're really talking about today, which is the administration building that you can see from the street.
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt. I just realized I need to step down from this. I have a client who's in this complex, a new client. So, just to be safe as we...
Okay. 7 degrees of separation, but that's all right.
That's a good question, if there's really a conflict there or not.
Well, we're all really careful now.
Okay, so I'll get back to that later. those are not all the colors of the lights. It's just the lights themselves. The colors would be these two right here. Here is the existing administration building I showed you a photograph of. We're putting a cocher on it. I think the best way to do this is go to perspective, and then I'll start. So not all the detail is here, but it gives you a real quick idea. We wanted to see, you're going to get a quick glimpse of the building as you come by when you hit this driveway entrance, and then the same with this. And so this is the main one as the people come in, and here's perspective A. What this doesn't show is the gigantic trees that are existing that will remain. There's one kind of snuck in right here, and that's why this is an elevation, and we were trying to play with the colors and get them right and see how it looks like on the building.
Justin, it might benefit everybody if you mention what's new to the building. Are you adding anything, or what is being added and what's existing?
Essentially, this is existing right here, and then everything is new in front of it. So we're basically
Front and on both sides.
Yes, we're taking this building here and taking it down to the studs, essentially. All new windows, electrical, plumbing, lighting. The concrete block won't get stucco, and then we're raising the parking lot because there's existing steps, and so now this is a ramp that comes down. This is all covered here. This is a bus stop for the residents, and so you can see here we've got this nice feeling that it's an entry. The idea we're trying to get is a little bit more residential than the 60s style that they have currently. And one of the things that we worked with is making sure that even though we're trying to detail this more like a residence, that the details are large enough to carry the size of the building. So we've got covered porch here that helps reduce the mass. This is a second story. We've got 12-foot plates, or floor to floor, I should say, and then this is 8 foot here. This is the little balcony off the back side that is for the bed and breakfast that is right here. Basically 4 units that are essentially identical, like an apartment or a hotel. And this is a real good snapshot of what you would see. This is sandstone here, a sandstone cap. This is stucco. This is all stucco. Then we're coming for materials, going to a hardy shingle to kind of break things up, and we've got that in 3 different locations to reduce the amount of stucco and kind of break things up a little bit. So go to a floor plan real quick. This shows the location of our lights, and our lights it's the very last sheet. So we have the existing building that's basically right here, and then this is all new covered porch that you walk into. You come up a ramp, and this new doors, reception area. This is something that's new that the board has not seen since the last time we were here. It's a wing of bathrooms. One of the things that we did is we did a full study a pre-case with the building department to see what our requirements were going to be for the number of fixtures in this area, and this is something that we've worked out. They're going to allow us to use these bathrooms for the multi-purpose room and the dining and so for the most part there are some new areas that are being remodeled, but not much is happening to the exterior.
the majority of the work.
Can I just interrupt you for just one more second? I just want to clarify that this is a final review, so Tony, we're supposed to be, we supposedly have already approved the mass, bulk, and scale of this building and all the elements. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what you're pointing out are changes from the design?
I just wanted
the project design?
wanted the board to know that this was a change that we had to work through, adding this portion. And I would have to look back at the last set of plans to see if that was reviewed.
The reason I'm asking is because does this require a revised project design approval? Because they are, the mass bulk and...
We worked with Peter Lawson as far as the planning portion of that.
And he said no.
He said that he was fine with it because it was required, basically, for...
Okay.
It seems like this is...
So we've already...
We reduced the square footage, so it wasn't a...
Okay.
There was an addition being proposed in this location originally when it went through the Planning Commission, and so we've taken out that addition completely
Okay.
to offset the square footage.
Okay. Keep going. Sorry about that.
Madam Chair, I'm confused, because if it already has project design approval, it's only that area that's changed that we're looking at, then that means the elevations as they're shown and so on, all of those are a given?
That was my question. Have we reviewed all of the whole project?
Yes.
We've reviewed
Yeah.
everything.
We reviewed the...
We've reviewed this whole new addition, this whole covered walkway, and the only...
Tony, can you grab the last set of approved plans? Maybe?
Yeah, maybe it would help if I had the last minutes that pertain, Tony, to this particular portion of the project.
So there's one set that got the project design approval for everything.
For everything, right.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
It'll be a large set, and it should be only 24 by 36.
So does that mean we can't comment on elevations?
I'm trying to see what apparently, it's looking like we gave the project design approval, which would mean that he's only here to talk about final details, minor changes to the exterior and finish schedules, and verifying that the entire set is ready to go to the building department with structural.
Right.
Okay.
So, but Tony's, just keep going, Justin, since Tony had to leave
Okay.
for a few minutes.
We have done a little bit of study in this area, and added some... We're going to have to rebuild this breezeway, but it's going to be the same. And we're going to add in skylights because this is a very dark area, and then a new skylight in this area as well. So those are new items. This is a new item here, which is an equipment well that there's an large existing tree in this area right here that helps screen that, and we brought it down as far as we could, but it's didn't seem appropriate to put it up in this area because of the distance away from the street. You can really see the roof. So I wanted to keep it to feeling a little bit more residential, that second story. So with the screening of the tree, the equipment well ends up, and that's one of the other reasons we did that study. So as far as we've studied this, and we've added a little bit of detail here. We're not required to have rails, but we want a separation between the landscaping, so we're creating a little bit of detail. We've got all of the detail keyed in on these larger elevations, the size of the outriggers and the detailing of the trim around the windows, the columns and the posts. We were able to reduce the stairs, the number of stairs. That was another thing that happened during the building department pre-case. They're allowing us one exit. So this was the single exit, instead of, before we had, coming off over in this area, a stair tower that we could remove completely. So that was a benefit. And then we brought our tower over here to hide it, as opposed to over here where it had a much more of an opportunity to be seen from the street. So those are some things that we've been working out.
So it seems like there's a lot of significant alterations to the design that have not been seen by us, but
Right.
Peter Lawson just felt that it didn't need to come back for revised project design approval. Correct, Tony? The planner just felt that these changes were, I mean, there's two-story additions and subtractions here that,
Well, we moved some mass over. The mass was over here. It was much more visible from the street. We hid it behind.
I know, yeah.
The previous
I can-
elevations, right?
Let's just do that. I think it would help everybody. This was the project design approval. Let's just put it.
Let's pull those back just a little bit.
And then let's put the other one.
Share the bus stop thing, is that this?
That's that, right.
Okay, let's put the other ones down here, see if we can get all this in. Let's get this elevation.
Okay, so here we have that element right here. It's
Do we have the complete elevation?
yeah. The smaller version.
Yeah, I'm a little confused too, Justin, I'm sorry. I'm seeing all of this. I'm not seeing this at all, and then I'm seeing a whole other...
That's this right here. Well, this is existing building, and so it's behind it. So we showed it.
So that's existing
Mm-hmm.
beyond. That's
Existing
not
beyond.
really part of this project. Okay.
So we've got all this new, we've got all this new, we've got a cupola.
The cupola's been removed.
The cupola's been... go
Madam
ahead.
Chair, I actually studied the details from here and here based upon what was on the plans here, and I want to bring the board's attention to what's being proposed as the final solution versus what we kind of saw.
Yeah, there's just so many, I'm sorry I keep interrupting you, but there are so many changes from the project design approval that this is not just, in my opinion, it's not just the final review of the architecture as we approved it. It's a change to the design. I don't know how, it's a change to...
Well, if you look at this elevation is essentially, except for detailing, is the same size, bulk, and scale. It's just detailed slightly different. And this is the same right here. It just does not have the cupola.
Is the span between posts the same?
Yes.
It looks quite a bit bigger in the new one.
These spans here?
No, at the bus stop, right there.
Oh,
It's
here?
like- It's almost 30 feet there, but in the previous mill, it looks like it's more in the 20s.
It's this width right here.
That's,
because-
yeah, exactly.
Why do we call this an in progress?
Here,
I think, yeah.
It's a good thing you're not here for finals. 32 feet.
We got 32 and...
26.
What were the two numbers?
32.
32 and 26.
So it did get a little
The
larger.
equipment will, all these windows,
Fenestrations.
all the fenestrations, pretty
Yeah,
much.
all the fenestration is different. Different location.
What's this? And then
That was the stairs that I was telling you about, and we were able to remove that completely.
Where was this building on this
right
drawing?
here is in the background. This
right here was on the side of this building. So it,
But our previous approval, our project design approval, did include that building in the background, even though it didn't show on this drawing?
no, this is an existing building, and I'm just showing it now to confuse everybody. So this is all existing, and I'm just showing a little bit more of what's happening existing beyond. This is all
Okay.
what we're looking at here. This right here was a set of stairs that went up to the bed and breakfast. There was 2 sets. I was able to eliminate that one to grab more green space, and I chose to do that.
Okay, so why don't we all just now look at, now that we know what the changes are, let's go back and let Justin finish his presentation. Sorry, Justin.
No problem.
We've got more to look at, though, and more to comment on, considering the changes. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, we've had to study very closely the ramps, and this is a ramp that we've put in. Let's see. We try to keep this is as flat as possible, and then it ramps down to another location. We've got details for handrails, for guardrails, for all the different things going on that we've detailed here. Sorry, elevator. We've really carefully looked at how this is all working out. This is the backside, and it's up against an existing building, and it's kind of an atrium. So this was very carefully studied how we could bring the guests down into the atrium.
So, okay, here's an example. Let's pull this over, and here's the west elevation as we approved it. Proposed administration building west, administration west, and to me they look like 2 completely different. Am I missing something?
Exactly, because this is going this direction. This is a gable end.
No, this is. I think it's just labeled incorrectly because I think
this is this.
Yeah. See that's.
Still, they're totally different.
This is in the background here, and so we've got. What we did is we created a more of a sense of entry here, and so that's what this is right here. This is just a railing that's for a patio, and we're not showing that, but we have some stonework and planting that's kind of creating that.
Are you lowering the building?
No, what we did is, this was before we had final civil, and I said that we worked hard to get less ramp happening close to the building, and as soon as you got away from the building, it started to ramp off. So that's what we did. So this is all flat here. That line came up.
They just look like 2 completely different projects. But, okay, keep going. There's that elevation. We saw 2 now. This is west. Where's west then on here?
So this is the interior courtyard elevation, so it may not even have been shown on this set of plans. I don't think it was.
So which is
this elevation here. So it would have been our project north elevation. So I bet we don't have a north elevation because it's right up against the existing building.
is it really a courtyard? Like there's buildings all surrounding the entire thing, or is it?
Let me show you the. So here is this is that building. This is on the second floor. So what you're seeing on that elevation, you're saying, well, why is this here? This is in the background, and you see a little bit of this, and this is in the background. But this is all existing,
here. This has a covered roof that goes across here. This has a covered roof that connects here. So, and then we have a trellis that goes across like a breezeway. And then this is a covered breezeway here that continues off into the distance. So there's not a lot of room in between this building, this north elevation.
Okay.
So at that point, we did not develop it, but we have developed it for this. So there's going back, you can see everything had to be carefully studied as far as we wanted this area covered and how it could be still open. We have roofs right very close by to the other side, and trying to bring down the mass where we could because we're so close to the other building. This is our elevator shaft that we're required to have by code. You can just barely see that elevator shaft right in this perspective. Here are our details. We tried to get our details large enough to carry things. So this is a 6x10 here, and let's see, it's a 2x6, and this is a 8x10 outriggers, and going around, this is all 6x. This material is pulled forward a little, about an inch or about a half of an inch in between.
It's a 2x, not a 6x, right?
I'm sorry, it's a 6x wide. Okay. It is a 2x6, and then you have, so it's a 2x6, and you have 7/8 inch of the stucco in front of it. And then we have our details, parapet wall. This happens over that little area that I was telling you in the courtyard that we're trying to bring down the mass and make it a little bit more residential in style because it's very close to people and it's a little cover for a ATM. So the detailing is a little more pedestrian size. And then little details. The double V for Viverde that we've come up with, and our handrail that essentially meets our ADA and the new ADA requirement because the lamb's tongue has to die back into something. And our lighting, which we're trying to keep not over the top arts and crafts, but tried to keep in the arts and crafts style. This happens in the porch by the parking lot, the porte cochere, and this is right at the front door. This is the columns that are right there at the parking lot. This is our ADA light that happens by the doors of the bed and breakfast, and this happens kind of in the walkway. So that's presentation.
All right. Thanks. Do we have anybody that would like to speak on this item in the audience? So I don't have any slips. Okay. Questions from the board? Kirk? Okay. Gary? Paul? Oh.
Justin, could you show on the site plan where this
Over here,
space-
over here. Please.
This is probably the best place to look at things as far as the site plan.
Okay, well, I need to reference the elevation. Yeah. So I'm curious about this face of this building, where that occurs in plan.
Let's see.
And particularly this large gable end. Right?
Okay, so this is. So this is happening right here.
Okay, and then can you
And then,
show?
and then you're seeing this part of the new building.
I see.
So,
Okay,
and
thanks.
so there's different. So it's this and this and this that you're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Two questions. One having to do with the porte cochere in this whole entry area. There's going to be a ramp that happens in the bus stop. Do you have a reflected ceiling plan of what the ceiling is going to look like, the underside?
We don't have a reflected ceiling.
Any
plan,
sections go
but
through
but
there?
there's no sections. But the it's flat ceiling and it's tongue and groove. So the essentially the right here.
Is it good? Oh, it's flat. Okay. And then the second question, on the west elevation, it shows the stairs coming from the second story element. I didn't quite understand where that was happening in the plan. I kept.
Right here. It's happening.
Let me show you what I see. This comes down to some wall here, and this is what's been baffling me.
Okay.
So where does this happen? Because it comes down, and then there's a nice.
So this is that wall right here.
It's in front of us.
So the stairs are in front of it. I got you. Thanks.
Sure.
Questions? No? Stephanie, questions?
Are you changing color of that horizontal expansion joint band?
Yes.
You are.
Yeah, it's the darker color. You can.
Okay, then that's, I just, between colors. And you guys decided not to do the vertical mullions on the windows that were shown in the previous?
Yes, we did.
And are you changing the color at the, I know you're using a sandstone cap, but are you changing color for the base?
The base, and I know that our printers, we tried to get this pea green to look like sandstone. It could not. Okay. And I brought a sample of the sandstone, and what we'd like to do is just match the sandstone with the stucco below. Get maybe a little darker.
Because they can't do the stone bases as previously approved?
No, we could do the stone bases. It started to look a little busy, but that's certainly something that we can study.
Any more questions?
Or to answer your question a little bit more on the windows and the mullions, we had that before, and then we started to look on campus, and it started to feel a little too craftsman because we're so close to these buildings that essentially we can't change that much. And so we decided to pull back on the windows for the mullions.
Okay, thanks. Comments? How about Keith? How about Keith?
Okay, I guess overall, the basic mass, bulk, and scale and direction of the project is consistent. I think on the changes that kind of having some issues with are the proportions of the entry structure. I think the broadening of that and flattening of the proportions is not so pleasant. Also, the scale of the equipment well is such that I think you need something more to kind of integrate it architecturally. I don't know if it's...
You mean the elevator shaft?
No, not the elevator shaft, the equipment well here.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if it's some sort of trellis or roof structure that makes it look like a faux balcony extension of the units next door, but somehow that architecturally just seems to be kind of out there. I think your detailing's good as always, and the colors are fine. I'm okay with the reduction of the stone. think those are my main comments. I think it's really the equipment well, the entry, and this is kind of a side observation. I find it somewhat interesting that we've taken a mid-century California modern building and now we're turning them all into a mid-19th century building. But I think you've done a good job of that. So.
Thanks, Keith. Paul?
I'll agree with Keith that the proportions of the front entry I'm having difficulty with, especially when you say that the you're trying to size up the members to fit the size of what you're trying to do, and you have 8x8 steel posts that are not wrapped with anything. So I think we lost some of the architecture quality in the beam that goes from post to post. If it's just an 8x8, it's going to read like a matchstick, and then you have your tongue and groove ceiling, and then that's going to get too busy for the proportions of what's happening. So that needs some attention on how to, because that's your most very important entry into the building. So that needs to be designed. That's not that.
Carrie?
Yeah, I find some of the changes are good, like removal of the staircase, and I would like to see if the equipment well is, I'd like to know from the mechanical point of view, if the equipment well is sized properly for what your use is. It seems a bit large for what you're doing, but I wouldn't know unless I saw it on the mechanical. But I would like to see, I agree with Keith that it needs to be somehow integrated architecturally. I don't know if the trellis, if adding mass of the trellis is going to do that, but I do think it needs to be integrated a little bit more architecturally. As far as the front porch goes, I think the previous design had a lot more character. I believe it had tapered columns coming up, and it had stone bases. And I do prefer the stone bases, but much more than that, I prefer the tapered columns that came up that were wrapped around, and I think that gave it some character that was necessary for this. So maybe you should bring it back to that design. That's it.
Thanks, Carrie. Kirk?
Thank you. So I'd like to comment on the elevations. For me, the bus stop entry problem has to do with the span here, and that it seems to me an easy solution would be to add additional posts and bases at the where you've got these lower elements. It's just too big of a span, really, for this style. And then just some minor comments about other elements on these elevations. I think this tower element needs some kind of vertical element to integrate it better with with how pronounced it is, even if it's just a plant-on. Something to coincide with the proportions and the elongated nature of that tower element. On the south elevation, I think there needs to be just some minor fenestration element on this big expanse of plaster right here. And then I think it's also true, I realize these are restrooms here, but some sort of architectural element, whether it's fenestration or fake grill or something happening there. And then I also think, given the scope of what's being done on the campus, that you could also begin, since you're doing such a fabulous job with creating a craftsman style, that in some of these buildings where you have these large expanses of gable ends, this one specifically, that just some small fenestration element would really help fix that. overly sized gable end there without any, that, I realize it has the trellis in front of it, but it needs something up high. And similarly, on the south elevation of the common building where you're doing some remodeling, this very sort of, I don't know, to me it's a 60s kind of treatment of this gable end could be addressed so that it fits in better. I realize, I'm not asking you to remodel the whole building, but something on here could be done to better integrate it with the new style that you're introducing. Those are my comments, I think. Detail 35, you could reduce the size of the exposed sheet metal cap as much as possible on its vertical legs. And then on the...
Detail 35 where?
9.2.
Right here?
This one, yeah, just seems like that's
We were
all
going
that
to,
metal.
it is, I know, and you pointed that out before.
Yeah.
On the same project, different building, and I decided to keep it larger there only because we plan to paint that, but it doesn't need to be that big. We can paint just the...
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, regards to the lighting, I think all of these go together well, and this seems like it's sort of an outcast in relation to the other three. The style doesn't quite conform to the rest of them. I wonder if something...
It's ADA compliant.
Right. I don't know if there's something more keeping with the style of the rest of them that could be found.
Okay. Thanks, Kirk. Stephanie?
I personally am missing some of the nice detailing, craftsman detailing of the last submittal. The taper that you had on these bases and the stone, and I don't think it would be too busy if these were just the stone work on the post bases that you have. You also seem to have a slight taper at that at the lower portion of the base stucco in the original submittal. That it was maybe it came out further. It was in the same plane as the upper portion. And that would help to help the design as well. I think it was also tapered at the base. And the mullions, it seems like maybe it wouldn't be too busy if it had one vertical mullion in that upper third portion of the window. And I think that if you're committing to going towards this craftsman style throughout the campus, that I don't think it would be too much, because you're remodeling eventually all the buildings, so to be like this craftsman style. So
it's been a struggle, and just a quick comment. It's been a struggle to what we had a lot more craftsman influence, and then when we came back and really looked at the existing buildings that we knew were going to be there for a long time and they weren't going to get the same treatment, to try to combine the two. And what we ended up deciding is to try to scale back the very craftsman detailing and have it more of a craftsman style that was a style that was more influenced by craftsmen.
Okay. That's it for you. Sorry, Justin, we're just really behind now. I want to make sure we stay a little bit on schedule. I, for the most part, agree with everything that's been said, particularly the bus stop span issue and the detailing of the post. You don't even have a detail in here specifically for that, so I think we're all...
He did.
Huh? Okay. Yeah, this is, I agree with everybody that I think that's not quite as successful because of that span, Justin. I'm having a little bit of a problem with exactly what you were just talking about, and that is how everything's integrating, and everybody else has touched on it, but based on kind of everything we've seen with all the other buildings, we haven't seen this detail at all anywhere with this 30-degree or so angled bracket anywhere on campus that I can remember. And I haven't seen this detail anywhere. This is taking on, to me, a much more contemporary approach to the Craftsman style, and I think that's what you were trying to do here, but then you're keeping a lot of the existing building, which isn't even Craftsman. I'm just thinking that, in my opinion, the detailing isn't integrating well enough yet. Aside from the obvious kind of proportion issues, I think you need to look a little bit closer at how all the details work together. And then your challenge is, like you said, how closely related the existing portions of the building are to the new portions of the building, and how that all works together, because we're going to want to see how that all works together. So that, I think I know your elevator tower, needs to be a certain height. To me, it just looks like a little gable roof was stuck on the top of a big tower, just because you were trying to figure out how to roof it. And I know those are challenges. It's just not quite working for me there. I don't know how big your equipment well needs to be. That's up for for you to decide what's appropriate.
6 by 6. We put it on the second floor.
Okay. I agree with Stephanie's comment about one additional vertical mullion here on these windows would be much more appropriate for the style. And I agree with Kirk on any ways that you can. This would just be one more way of incorporating, instead of making a division and saying we're not doing anything from this point on anywhere, and then from this point on we're rebuilding and putting a lot of attention. It's how much you integrate the existing building and how you do that. Kirk made some suggestions on fenestrations to the north and south elevation. Those were good. I think those were good. But it's how you kind of bring it all together that for me isn't quite there yet. And I think that's kind of it for me. So this is really an in progress, is what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing. But
kind of a straw vote from the board as far as, do you want me to go more traditional with the detailing of this building, or is it somewhere in between more appropriate because of the close proximity to our...
I don't think anybody's going to really tell you which direction to go. I think we're only going to comment on what we see as not working, that maybe isn't successful, or things that are successful. I think that's kind of it's a difficult straw vote to make, is which direction to go. You've already decided which direction you want to go. It's just we're just responding to how far you've taken it in some places or not, and then how you've integrated it into the existing. So.
Madam Chair, if I could maybe throw 2 cents in on that, Justin. I think there's a couple, obviously a bunch of different ways to approach it, but one approach might be, since this is the common building, this is kind of the jewel, and that's where the over-the-top detailing is, and then everything else kind of bleeds out from that, but still kind of relates to it as you've done in the residential buildings. And the other, maybe more challenging but perhaps more interesting, might be the integration with all the kind of low-pitch 60s kind of pseudo-modern stuff, and shake it all up and see what you get. But
And Chair, I'll attempt a motion.
Great.
Let's say indefinite continuance to return to the full board, addressing the following comments. detailing should, in general, the mass bulk and scale is acceptable as presented, except for some isolated issues. One that is the span of the supports and supporting beam at the bus stop is too large and needs to be reduced. Some board members felt that the pillars, especially those prominent ones at the entry, should be tapered as was shown at on the original submittal. The study adding one additional vertical mullion to the upper windows on the new building, and in general, study a more uniform craftsman approach to the building. Study reducing the overhang on the stone cap at the pillars. On the south elevation at the second floor administration building, study adding an additional fenestration element to break up the large plaster mass. On the west elevation of the administration building, study adding a more vertical element on the tower. Study adding on the east elevation of the administration building at the second floor, study adding additional detailing or enhancement of the equipment well. On the north elevation of the common building, study adding additional detailing on the gable ends at the new administration addition and also at the multi-purpose remodel. On the south elevation of the common building, study adding enhancements to the large gable end of the existing lounge area to be more to integrate better with the new style. Study an alternative to the ADA wall sconce to be more in keeping with the craftsman style of the rest of the fixtures. That's all I have.
All right, thanks, Kirk. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second the motion.
All right, Keith, under discussion, anything?
I have one. Besides those items, nice project.
In there.
Just under discussion on those items. On the equipment well, can we add also to study reduction of it?
It's fine.
Anything else?
It doesn't need to be in the motion, but it'd be nice to see a reflected ceiling plan of the porte-cochere area. And I'm sure you...
It's flat.
It's flat. It's going to be large and boring. That's my professional opinion. And you can do something to jazz it up. And then if you have that drop beam...
And then do a reflected
well, it's something. And if you had some sections that just want to verify your overall building height with what the preliminary plans were. So if you can give us those sections as you're producing.
Anything else?
Excuse me, Manager.
Yeah.
Does the board recommend returning in progress? Or are you confident enough that it can return for final?
We're not confident of anything.
Leave that up to the end.
The confident. We're not confident, but he can try to come back and think positively, and maybe we'll really like it. So, take that for what it's worth. Whatever you want to do, Justin. Does that sound okay, Tony? Okay. Anything else? Stephanie?
I just noticed something that I didn't notice before, the brackets that you mentioned, Dawn.
Yeah.
What was not, they're only half-inch thick. This one? Mm-hmm. And
They're a half-inch thick?
Yeah. I just noticed it.
So they look like steel gussets?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can add that.
Can we add?
I think it's covered under their general comment about craftsman style, but that we could restudy the post-beam brackets.
Yeah. Okay. Good idea. Anything else? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. Motion carries. Thanks, Justin. Thank you. It's a big project. And we understand the challenges that you face.
I know, it's blending it. Residential is easier.
Right. Well, it would be if that was the direction it was going to go. All right, we're on to our fourth and final item, 635 Olive Street. Is that ours, Justin? Yeah. This is a new item. And a proposal to demolish an existing residence and construct a 3-story mixed-use building with a basement. All right. So we're looking at different new plans?
No, I just added some things for clarification that the staff wanted so that the plans haven't changed.
So we're not looking at this one at all?
No.
Okay. You can compare those, Tony, or whatever you want to do.
Madam Chair and members of the board, I'm Michael Porter. I'm the architect of the project. And the owner is here, Stephanie Dotson. And Alexa.
My name is Alexa Schlow. I'm an architect working for Michael Porter.
So this project, just to get everyone situated, is at the corner of Olive and Ortega. The China Bowl sits here, and the Pot Clinic sits here.
Which one? Olive and Ortega.
You don't know?
Olive and Ortega. So where?
So just down the street here on
photos?
Ortega.
Across the street is the transition house?
Next, the transition, China Bowl, transition house.
Do you have a site plan showing adjacent structures?
Yeah, they are.
Only on my survey do I have some indication of where the adjacent structures are. Oh, I don't. It's not on this one. But the China Bowl's here. Pot Clinic.
I'm still just lost. I need to see photos so I can.
Dawn,
I have no
look
idea
at-
where the
there's
pot
some
clinic
pictures
is.
here. I don't know where the pot clinic is either.
Okay.
Tile goes down there.
So,
And that's the awning for the China Bowl.
yes, at least one of them. And the transition house is adjacent to the China Bowl, so closer to City Hall. And then the property adjacent here, which is the Pot Clinic. That was recently was changed from a residence to a commercial pot dispensary with an apartment in the back.
And Townco's next to it, Dawn.
There's one structure and then Talco.
And then Hayward's
She'll know
across
where
the street.
It'd be nice if we had Tony went on every submittal adjacent properties, so it would help us a little bit more.
So, are we situated now as to where we're at? The property is zoned CM, and as a result, there are no setbacks, and the height requirement is 60 feet. We're proposing a mixed-use project with wine production facility, and then Stephanie and her fiance's residence on top. Step you through the floor plans. The basement is wine cask storage. The on-grade floor is going to include the production facility, residential parking covered, and then access up to the upper residence. Then we have a second floor, which is case storage, and then the residence with Stephanie's studio, internally accessed from the residence, and then a rooftop deck.
So this is a studio and a single-family house?
Yes.
Two structures there. Two.
It's internally accessed. It has to be part of the residence. So by way of elevations, off of Ortega Street, we have perforated metal scrim, and then various materials stepping backwards and forwards with concrete block receiving wall on the two sides adjacent to the China Bowl under the pot clinic. That perforated metal scrim, we are intending that Stephanie's going to develop a custom pattern for that scrim, and then the materials behind that will be tunnel dash stucco and smooth finish stucco. So if you have any other questions.
Before we have questions, we need public comment, and seeing nobody in the audience, then we will start questions. Who wants to start questions? So everybody's still digesting.
I'll dive in.
Go ahead.
Could you walk us through the floor to floors, please? Just through the building.
Dimensions, the plate height.
In the section here. So I have a 9-foot tall basement. Then I'll bring up. You have a scale here, or? So the production floor is basically 18.5 feet tall at the highest point. And then I have split on the, we have case storage over this level. So I have an 8-foot plate in here.
Like a mezzanine?
It's like a mezzanine, but I can't call it a mezzanine because it's not a third of that floor area, of the lower floor area.
Yeah, the plate height here.
In the studio, we have a 12-foot plate, and the rest of the structure has 9-foot.
And go to the site plan, please. Let's see. Just kind of walk us through the parking, how that pays out. So you have 2 residential spaces.
Yes, here covered. Now, because it's a mixed-use project, we are required to have 1 residential space, and it doesn't have to be covered, but it's recommended to be covered. And then there are 3 spaces allocated for the commercial use. And we've had a long discussion with staff about how that has been subdivided. Simply, case storage and cask storage are counted as warehouse, and then the production is counted as a factory.
And
So 1 per 500.
Got it. And is this third floor studio considered residential or
Residential
commercial
because
space?
it's inside of the, and we are under the Measure E pieces. So.
Okay. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I'm going to go back to the elevations, if I can find them. ahead. Yeah, anybody jump in with questions?
The concrete block wall shown on the site plan, is that the plaster or straight block?
We were proposing exposed block. We're here just in our initial concept review to get your feedback. So not a lot of details on our landscape. Some other issues haven't been addressed, but we wanted to get your reaction to the mass bulk and scale. And
Okay. And then on the elevation sheet, could you point out again where the middle screen is? Is it these panels here?
Yes.
It's like 3 by 6.
Where are you pointing to, Kirk?
On the east elevation.
here.
And so they only occur on the east and the north, is that correct?
Correct.
And then,
Because the other part of the building is up against the two property lines.
okay. And that just.
So those two elevation.
And those are exposed concrete block?
Yes.
And then the rest of the building is plaster, is that my understanding?
Yes,
Yeah,
with the scrim in front.
Where shown?
So, if you want, maybe that gives you, a clear picture.
For that elevation, yeah. Then, but it looks like, sorry. So what's this material up here?
That's a railing material.
Oh.
So we have a roof deck.
Oh, there's a roof deck. And what kind of material would that be?
I'm thinking that it's some wood panels, since we'll use wood panels on the entrance to the street side residence entrance here.
Okay, thanks.
More questions from the board? Chris, do you have any questions?
So is that existing or proposed?
Proposed, because there's only a couple of orange trees on the site now.
So nothing really worth saving necessarily, or that you are saving?
No.
Okay. And then has it been determined, it looks like you're going to be a Tier 3 stormwater management. Have you gotten into that at all, as far as the drainage on the site?
No, we've talked in a preliminary way to the landscape architect regarding that.
Okay.
And then we'll have special considerations because we are a wine production facility.
Okay.
So there's a lot of issues with mechanical and waste runoff.
Right.
That brings up another question. Trash storage?
I haven't shown it on here, and that was one of the comments back from staff.
Okay, thanks.
Gary, do you have any questions?
Sure, why not? Is this building in a flood zone right now?
Are you in a
Pardon?
flood zone?
Is it?
Yes.
It is. And okay, because I was just curious about the basement.
And we have a soils report. That's one of the reasons why we're doing the basement, because the soils are poor there. We're going to have to excavate out 5 feet and do, extended footings or caissons. So, and we need to have storage for the wine cask.
Okay. Your architectural inspiration and neighborhood compatibility, where did we derive this from?
A couple of things. I looked around the neighborhood and I didn't see that there was a consistent architectural style. There's a Japanese house, there's the transition house, there's Arnoldi's, there's Hayward's,